My guest today knows how to rewire the way leaders think, literally. Hannah Conkey is a neuroscience driven leadership expert, startup founder, and top 100 leader who helps CEOs and organizations unlock their full potential. In the next 20 to 30 minutes, you'll hear how small shifts in the brain can create big changes in performance, culture, and business results. If you're leading a company and you want your team performing at their peak, this is the episode for you. So, welcome, Hannah.
Thank you so much for having me today, Scott.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's great to have you here. So, you've had a fascinating journey from banking and financing to founding MindPilot with stops along the way in startups, global organizations, and now neuroscience-based leadership. So, for those who may not know you yet, how do you describe what you do and who you help?
So, my background, I spent a lot of time working in organizational design and development and health and fitness. The work that I do is helping people and organizations think, feel, and perform at their best. So, using neuroscience, so helping people understand the way the brain and the body works, and also integrating neurotechnology to help people get a really good baseline to understand their brain activity, the way their body operates. And there's a lot of really great emerging neurotech coming through, which is pretty exciting. So, we can use that both to map the brain. It's not just, helping people understand how it works, but also understanding how their own brain and biology works, and then having quite targeted individual protocols that support them and help empower them to think, feel, and perform at their best. And then the same thing from an organizational perspective, we work with organizations to develop neuroscience based or brain friendly based people and business strategies. So we do everything from looking at people's people and leadership or companies' people and leadership strategies. We also design workplaces. So the architecture, so looking at how the environment that people operate in or learn in impacts the way that we think, the way that we feel, and the way that we interact with each other. And that has a direct impact on productivity, performance, and well-being.
Okay. What's the common thread through all these career chapters?
Think the big thing for me has been performance, well-being, and change. So when looking at, I did start off in banking and finance, and then have worked in lots of different organizations, particularly around change and transformation and leadership development strategy. And the biggest thing has been looking at where people and organizations are at today, where they want to get to, and then helping them develop strategies and change, habits and practices and implement different ways of working, thinking, and operating to get to the outcome that they're looking for.
Okay, so you've had a career that blends the corporate leadership, the startups, and the neuroscience driven learning. What were some of those pivotal moments that maybe shaped your focus on these organizational and individual effectiveness?
I always was, even as a child, was really fascinated with human behavior and the brain and the body and the world and how everything works. And I studied psychology, but really wanted to understand the brain. And I was fascinated with that and how everything that we eat and experience through our sensory system impacts our neurochemistry and the way that we think and feel. And after working in many different organizations, I think a lot of the time I'd see that organizations would focus on behavioral performance outcomes and design strategies, not necessarily thinking about the way humans are wired. And so I was working on a leadership program around safety, and I was working with an organization. There was a huge number of deaths, injuries, and significant costs for people from a safety perspective for them personally and also for the organization. And part of this program, I really wanted to get into the neuroscience and help as an organization, help them understand why people make the decisions that they do and the impact of that much more broadly than just on the business, but also for individuals, and to really bring a science based approach to the recommendations that I was making, both from a leadership, performance, and outcomes perspective. So I like the fact that we can use neuroscience and measure the uh, the way our brains respond and perform in different situations and scenarios, and that we can, particularly now, obviously with a lot of the advancements in technology, but we can actually, real time measure those shifts, which is pretty cool.
What made you believe it could be a game changer for leadership and performance?
Probably similar when we're looking at, a lot of organizations invest in leadership development, they invest in well-being. And I see that even with a lot of the work that I was doing, I see a lot of organizations will focus on whatever the key business challenge is at the time. So, there's a lot of focus on AI at the moment. Sometimes it's around leadership, then it's well-being, then it's customer. I really wanted to have a holistic approach to organizational focus on people, performance, and well-being. And so I worked with a lot of particularly CEOs and executives and senior leaders who appeared to be high performing on the outside and driving a high performance culture, but then wouldn't take a lunch break, were not sleeping. And, all of these uh, things start to accumulate and impact how we show up, our energy, our ability to self regulate, and what that means in terms of creating culture, trust, performance, and the direct impact on the employees as well. So I really wanted to be able to show some of the data and the research, but also
Okay.
integrate that into the strategies so that leaders could see the real benefits of it as they start putting these things into practice.
And then was there a moment where you saw neuroscience shift the results for a client?
Yeah, I've been very fortunate to see with a lot of the work that I do because it's, doing a lot of diagnosis up front and getting a lot of data and measures and looking at, well, how are we going to measure this? What do we want to see change at an individual and organizational level? And so when we can use some of the neurotech and use these different measures, we can align it back to sleep, productivity, performance, engagement, retention, particularly post COVID. I know for organizations, particularly in Australia, encouraging people to come back and work in the office has been a big one. We can see it in terms of the customer experience, people self reporting around the impact that it's had on their sleep, their, you know, overall well being, their personal relationships, lifestyle factors. So we can see quite significant benefits for individuals and for organizations, for the families and friends and the broader community as well.
What made you step out of a corporate and into founding your own company?
Part of it's similar to what I mentioned before around, I've seen, and I've been very fortunate, I've worked with some really great organizations. I really uh, have enjoyed the work that I've done in organizations. And part of the reason I set up a health and fitness business many years ago was because I could see there was, focus on strategy, focus on business, focus on outcomes, focus on leadership. But again, I can see this real opportunity to help people focus on understanding themselves, understanding the brain, understanding their bodies, understanding their lifestyle factors. And I think, when you work in an organization, there's always certain limitations around how much influence and ownership you can have on a strategy and shaping that. And I've been very fortunate, as I said, I've worked with some really great organizations who have enabled me to do that. What I've wanted to be able to do is really come up with a holistic solution where we're
Yeah.
able to look at the neuroscience. We can partner with some really incredible leaders around the world, particularly in the neuroscience and biotech space. So, where we can help people understand their blood work, do the mapping, get a really full picture of themselves and integrate those into, particularly when we're coaching people. So, integrate those into the individual strategies that we work with people on so that it's very unique and individual to them. And then we can help people get these micro changes that lead to really big outcomes. So I've really wanted to be able to do that because I think most people are operating at 40, 50, 60, 70% of what they could be
Yeah.
and, how well they feel, how energetic they feel, their quality of life and their quality of not just getting through the day, but getting from the day, there's definitely an opportunity for that. And the same thing for organizations, really being in a position where I love working with individuals and I love seeing the results that come from that. I think and one of the reasons I've always worked with corporates is the opportunity to really scale the level of impact that we can have. So being able to go in and work with organizations and help them understand the brain, the body, the role of the built environment and how where people sit, the level of noise, the quality of air, greenery, how all the architecture impacts the way that we think. And so
Mm.
even from a work design perspective, helping organizations structure their workflows and their operating rhythms that are aligned to our natural biology and rhythm. So, yeah, I guess being in a position where I can do that on a much broader scale and have a much greater impact for people and businesses has been a big factor for me.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing more on that and to going a little bit deeper and explaining more on that. I appreciate that. So, from your experience, what are some of the blind spots that even the most accomplished executives have when it comes to leading effectively?
I see that one of the key things that tends to come up quite a lot is, again, a lot of people wake up and it's, quick wake up, get ready for the day. And we're thinking about what happened beforehand. We're thinking about what's coming up. And so, how we show up for ourselves and for other people, our intention throughout the day, what's the impact that we're wanting to have, our clarity and effectiveness around decision making, all of these things come into play. And so, I see even for a lot of senior leaders, there's a bit of this sort of hustle and just push through mentality, both for themselves and for employees as well. And so I I like seeing where leaders have these moments where they recognize, okay, I'm not sleeping well, maybe I'm not eating well, I'm pushing through, but the impact of that is I'm bringing this energy with me to everybody that I interact with. And
Mm.
that's having an impact on how they respond to me. And that impacts culture, it impacts customers. And so I think the blind spot is really understanding just how much our sensory system impacts how we feel and our ability to think well and how we perform. So, what we eat impacts our brain function. Our environment impacts our brain function. All of these things impact our emotional state, our well-being, and again, it's going to impact the results that we have.
Okay. So you've said leadership is as much as about rewiring how we think as it is about skills. What's one maybe say practical science-backed change a CEO could make this month or next month, time of the year, that would have an immediate impact on their effectiveness?
It's a really simple one, and there's lots. A really simple one that I like to get people to start off with is, can I sort of link to, is the day, like the night before, writing everything down. And so thinking about the day that you have ahead of you, thinking about who you want to be and how you want to show up, both for yourself and for other people, so that when you're quite intentional and want to be present throughout the day, you can think about, okay, am I aware of my body language? Am I aware of
Mm.
my breathing? How am I feeling within myself? Am I feeling rushed? Am I trying to get from here to there, very quickly and checking my phone while people are talking to me? So I think we're in a time now where our focus is very much, can be taken by other people or other things if we allow it to be. So being really intentional about how I want to start my day, taking some time to breathe and just stop and reflect, even for a couple of minutes. Once you leave the house in the morning, whatever your mode of transport is to get to work or whether it's working from home, but just take a few deep breaths, think about, this kind of mind body awareness piece. And then the same thing each time you're interacting with somebody, just really focus on listening and be aware of yourself, but be aware of the other person as well. And so when we start to regulate our own nervous system, other people respond very differently to that because they pick up on
Mm.
the energy, they pick up on our level of calm or chaos. and they will
Yeah.
respond differently to that.
Kind of makes me think of if somebody says something and when they say something and you're thinking of a response where you just, even if it's just that you take a pause before you don't respond emotionally and you like think this
Absolutely.
through. What was this person trying to ask me? So,
Yeah.
where do you see leaders underestimating the science of performance?
I think a lot of the time we have, in organizations, there's challenges around time, productivity, performance, cost. So there's competing priorities and pressures. If we don't really present the case well to help leaders understand the science, I think it's easy to override that with, we just need to get this done. So I think there's a real opportunity for people in the HR or learning space to have a deeper understanding around the brain and the body and how it works, and then to integrate some of that into people and business strategies, because the there's so much information out there now to support all of this, and we can see that, as I mentioned before, directly measure how much of an impact the spaces we operate in, how much of an impact different factors have on decision making, and also even just neurodiversity, neuro inclusion, where we're creating, we do have different brains, we are all different, and so helping create space and choice for people in the environments that they work in and the type of work that they're doing. If you're wanting people to do task focused work versus innovative work or collaborative work, having different spaces that enable people to do that will create a better outcome for them.
I love that idea of just creating the right space for that moment, whether it's like you said, it's a group or if it's by themselves so they can tap into their own creativity. What would you say tends to happen once leaders make that change?
It really influences the way they see the world and the way they see themselves and their own lives, and then how they interact with other people. Over the years, I've seen a lot of, we just need to do it, so just do it. And in organizations or in any business, obviously there's outcomes that we need to meet, but there's a reason why people push back around change or, not doing things a certain way. We do have these peaks and troughs around energy and focus and performance and well-being. So I definitely have seen leaders show up better, culture and engagement scores better, where people are coaching each other, they're sharing information, creating a learning culture within the organization, which also becomes a really positive thing. And people are more engaged, leaders are more engaged. They have more energy. They're having a really positive impact on their people and even across, with their peers, which means you get better business outcomes, you get better customer outcomes, and people want to work for leaders who are engaging and supportive and understand these things. I think it enables them to be more flexible and adaptable in their approach and take more of a, okay, there is a, you know, neuroscience based reason for this. That's why we're doing this. And we can trust that we'll get the right outcome as a result of that.
When you work with organizations, where do you typically start to drive real transformation? Is it leadership, behaviors, systems, culture, or maybe something else?
It's a combination. So the diagnosis is really important, and I like to spend a bit of time there to really understand the business, their strategy, their culture, leadership, the environment that they're operating in. So I'll really look at a whole range of factors. Leadership obviously plays a very key role in that, because the leaders at the top will directly influence the culture. And so I think sometimes we forget that senior leaders are people as well. And so really, working with leaders to understand how they're running their own personal lives and their own
Mm.
mindset and their diet and lifestyle factors as well before they even come into the workplace. And we'll, do an assessment of the building and, where people are working and the type of work that they do and how they design their workday and a whole range. Yeah. So there's quite a whole range of different factors that we'll look at. And I think that enables us then to get this holistic view and then
Yeah.
integrated approach.
So you've worked in advised large, complex organizations. What's one shift you've seen that turns a company from good to truly high performing?
There's focusing on leadership and learning has been a really key factor for me. So when I see people unite around this, shared purpose, values, and having a really good understanding of their brain, their body, little things that they can do, small shifts that they can make, I've seen where you get this individual change in performance, well-being, and output, and also then this on a much greater scale where you get that across the organization. And so helping people develop a learning mindset. I really believe that most
Mhm.
challenges occur because people have a gap in understanding, knowledge, or capability. And so for me, I really work with people to help them understand that you can pretty much solve anything through learning. So if you're feeling stuck, if you're not feeling energetic, if you're not sleeping, if you don't like certain aspects of your life or your work, or you're not achieving your goals, whatever it might be, that we can pretty much solve any of that through learning. So, helping people develop this learning mindset and becoming curious about who they are and who they could be and what do they want for themselves, and then what does that mean more broadly in the context of self-esteem, self-confidence, and their identity, their relationships, their financial and wealth state, their future, their hobbies, things that they enjoy doing, and obviously their personal and professional career and development and growth. So trying to align this learning mindset into all of these different parts of their life and help people then redirect and focus on what's really important to them and also for the organization. So, at an organizational level, where an organization starts to see that learning is not a nice to have, it's a need to have, and actually it's a really key enabler for organizational success. If you've got all of these people that are learning and have this learning mindset, the adoption of knowledge and increase in capability, confidence will accelerate. And that's a real positive for the business.
I love that. Yeah, just thinking like if you're not willing to learn, if you don't have that mindset of the roadblocks you're gonna hit, and you're like, there's other ways, there could be better ways. Are you at least open?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
So, what role does well-being play in organizational success? And then, how do you convince commercial-minded leaders that it's not just a nice to have?
I'm glad you asked this question. A lot of organizations, I think, layer well-being on top of everything else. So we should do something about well-being. So whether that's EAP, whether it's providing fruit or healthy snacks in the office or, gym membership or whatever it might be. I'd love for people to think about well-being as really one of these key foundational factors before people even get to work. Because if you're tired and haven't slept, or you have health issues or mental health issues, or not eating well, all of these things will have a direct impact on how you think, feel, and behave. And so, the organizations that I've seen do this really well, understand that and they integrate this as part of their strategies. How can we design the organization, our people and business strategy, our leadership development, our workflows, all of these different, our meetings? How can we design all of these with the brain in mind? Because it's the brain and the body that responds to that. So if you haven't slept all night, the best people and business strategy in the world is not going to help you, get through the day. So that's then where we see people really surviving and not thriving because they're not showing up as their best. And so maybe they're tired, maybe they're hungover, maybe they had a really high sugar breakfast and their energy levels have already crashed before the day even begins. So helping organizations see that well-being is directly linked to performance, because it's not just people feeling good and having a good time. It's actually the physiological response that people have to their environment and to everything that's happening will then have a direct impact on performance. So if we feel good, we've got more energy to perform better and we make better decisions and we have greater clarity, and even things like our mood and emotional regulation. When we're feeling better from a mood perspective, our relationships improve and we have better conversations and we're able to show up better, and that has a better impact on the people around us as well.
From a neuroscience and learning perspective, what do CEOs need to do differently to prepare their organizations for the next decade?
I think there's a real opportunity to align business strategy with humans. So there's so much focus on AI, and AI is, it's great. It's changing the world at a really rapid rate. I think we've got an opportunity to see humans and the human operating system in a very similar way that we do. So with AI. So if we think about people almost like think about ourselves almost like the human operating system, what instructions would we give to our own brain? What upgrades would we make to improve the way that we think, our productivity, performance, and well-being? I think organizations have got a real opportunity to understand this and to think about people as their greatest asset. So even though we know that AI will play a really key role, we still need to invest in people and think about how we invest in people sort of in parallel, because we need people to obviously can leverage AI, and that's a really great tool, but we still want people to be really focusing on improving their brain and their thinking and their learning and their growing. And so for CEOs, the faster and more effectively their people can grow and look after themselves and take care of themselves and be their best everywhere that they go, that's a better impact for the organization. So I would say one of the things is not seeing AI as let's focus and invest in that and decrease how much we invest in people, because
Mm.
they both need to grow together.
What's one leadership myth you wish you would disappear forever?
I think maybe resilience. So, I see resilience get called out a bit, and it's obviously, important. Not seeing resilience as the ability to just push through, but actually helping people see the value of rest. And I know a lot of people, and I've been guilty of it myself, where people see resting or taking a break as a negative, but actually where, we're encouraging people to take, to equip them to perform at their absolute best, but then also making sure that people understand how to balance lots of different types of rest. So helping people work out the types of rest that they need and what's going to be beneficial for them to then bounce back and, perform at their best again. So when we look at things like ultradian rhythms, so our 24-hour clock is aligned to, our circadian rhythm. So when we look at ultradian rhythms from a work design perspective, we have these sort of 90-minute peak periods of energy and then, say, like a half an hour or so downtime. So, even with that, encouraging people to use that time to then go for a walk and have a walking meeting, or
Mm.
take 5 minutes within that to just stop and reflect and reset. My goal for today, or my intention for today, was to listen and ask more questions, or to slow down and be more present, or whatever it is. And
Mm.
so take 5 minutes, check in with yourself, reflect, how am I going with that? What might I need to adapt or adjust? Or maybe it's just going for a walk around the block, or maybe it's finding someone and having a laugh. But I think, um, you know, yeah, working out what's important for people and encouraging them to do that so that they can come back better and more energized.
So you might have just answered this, but what's one thing you do every day that keeps you?
There's a couple of things, I guess, for me that I know work, and that is I write everything. So I sort of plan longer term, but every day,
Mm.
the night before, I'll always write out everything that I'm going to do the next day
Mm.
and prioritize those. I focus on making sure I get good sleep, I generally eat a ketogenic diet, but, focus on eating and, nourishment, hydration, because that has a direct impact on, how you think and your energy levels. So I do that. And then in the morning, I exercise. I do some, mindfulness and breathing and just aware of those things. And then in between meetings, I will just take a really short break to close off and reflect on how that interaction or conversation went, and then kind of reset myself then so that I can show up and be fully present for the next
For the
person
next
or
one.
interaction that I'm going to have. And then at the end of the day, do a bit, I usually exercise in the morning and at night, but I'll do reflect on the day and how it went, and then reset myself for the next day as well.
I like that you said because something similar where I used to write, like I would catch myself if I can't sleep. It's anxiety thinking of the things I need to do the next day. And I found that if I just took a moment to write stuff down, make that list for tomorrow, it's like removing it from me having to think about it. I would get great 8 hours of sleep, whatever. I was like, I
Yeah.
felt good. And I woke up and it was like, it wasn't tossing and turning thinking about that thing. Is that part of why you do that, to write it
Yeah.
down? Because it helps you? Yeah. Okay.
Absolutely. So what tends to happen is if there's all these things sort of floating around in our mind, often it's not until we write them down that we become aware of what they are. And so we
Mm,
carry all of those things with us throughout the day. And it's, don't forget to get milk on the way home. And,
yeah.
you've got to do this, do that. Oh, what about this person? What about that? I've got this meeting. And so, one, to get everything out of your head and onto paper creates clarity and a little bit more, peace, because then we can say, well, if I've got all of these things on my mind, write them down, I can prioritize them and I can deal with them. The other thing that I like to do is a bit of self coaching. So, sometimes we don't have someone around at the time to, ask us questions. And often other people are so busy trying to get through the day as well that when we talk to people, they'll offer us advice or tell us what to do. They don't necessarily, play the role of coach and ask us really good questions. And so one of the things I like to do is, and encourage other people to do, is just ask yourself questions and then write them down. So it might be,
Mm,
what's on my mind? What am I avoiding? What am I worried about? Or what's something that might get in the way of, this thing going well. So just having some good questions that you can ask yourself as well if you are feeling uneasy about something, because often these are the things that keep people awake at night. There's usually
mm,
something there. And so
yeah.
asking yourself what it is and then writing it all out. And then, well, how am I going to deal with it? And try and just get up and deal with it first thing the next day. It means that we can, sort of park that and be present and then create the time and space to deal with the things that we really need to that matter the most.
Lovely. Okay, great. Okay, so last one for you. For leaders listening who want to explore neuroscience based approaches for themselves or their teams, where's the best place they can connect with you?
LinkedIn, Instagram, or through the website www.mindpilot.com.au.
All right. Thank you so much, Hannah. I really appreciate your time with this.
Thank you so much for having me, and thanks everyone for listening.
Yes. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of The Wellness Grow Show. If today's conversation sparks something for you, hit subscribe so you don't miss the stories, strategies, and insights from the front lines of wellness innovation. If you're a founder, operator, or health leader exploring growth into institutional markets and have a story worth telling, I'd love to hear from you. Reach out directly on LinkedIn or YouTube. And if you found this valuable, share it with a peer or post it online. You never know who needs to hear it. Until next time, stay well, keep moving, and keep building what matters.